You ready, Rob?
I'm ready. Yes.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Special Board of Education meeting Tuesday, July 18th, 2023 at 6:36. If we can mute and then do the pledge. Thank you. Roll call. I'll do it by the people I know who are here. Deb, Vic, Vinny, Joe, Nicole, Stephanie, Shelley, and Mike. Mike, any board correspondence?
None at this time.
Okay. So then we go into Nicole, the next section of the meeting, the action items.
Okay. All right, so the first item that we have on the agenda in this section is bylaw 9314 and the policy adoption revisions that we just discussed at our policy committee meeting, which literally just ended a minute before we started here for this meeting. For those of you who are unfamiliar, bylaw 9314 it gives us the ability, if we wanted to, in this instance, to suspend with our usual 2-read requirement, so long as we state a specific purpose. And in this regard, we're discussing whether or not we want to adopt these 2 policy items. And we're recognizing the fact that it's summertime, that we don't have regular meetings scheduled, that we are combating vacation times, which makes it difficult to get a quorum. And also due to the important nature of the changes that are being discussed in these 2 policies, if we do decide to adopt it, we need to get the word out to the groups that would be impacted by this sooner rather than later, so that they could be in compliance for the beginning of the school year, and so that they can hit the ground running in September and aren't disrupted. In order for us to use policy 9314, we need to get a majority vote of the Board of Ed members that are present. That's basically my summary of what 9314 has to say. Does anybody have any questions or concerns? No.
Can you just give us, give us what next steps would be?
So what I think we would do is, at this point in time, go through what the 2 policies are that we discussed during our policy committee meeting, and discuss them and decide, do we want to act on them tonight without a second read, or using this suspension of our policies that's in our bylaws, or do we want to decide that we're going to go forward as normal and we're going to do a first read tonight, we'll have our discussion, and then we'll schedule a second read at a later date? I see Joe's raising his hand.
Go ahead, Joe.
Just real quick, if we do suspend the portion of our bylaw via Robert's rules, it just need a 2/3 majority vote from the members present in the quorum?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yep. So can I dive into the policies, and then we'll discuss what we want to do with them?
Sure.
Okay. So the first policy that we have down today is 1201 community organizations. And I don't know, Mike, do you want to help me out here with how this came about, or what we're doing here?
Sure. You guys can hear me, right? Great. So the purpose of this, or the impetus for this, is just to, we want to encourage healthy interaction between the parent-run organizations in Oxford Public Schools. We have a lot of organizations that work with the public school system, and we want to make sure that our expectations and how we interact is consistent and is very transparent. We want to make sure that all the organizations are treated equally, fairly, and in the best interest for students and the district as a whole. So that's where it started from. I believe this is considered a new policy. This isn't a revision to an existing policy. But it talks about, in organizations, leadership, and getting, basically parents, guardians, you want to have people who have skin in the game, whether they are, have active students in the school that's affected, or, I think some of the concept where if your kid is outplaced, make sure they are able to participate, school administrators. It has to do with, the banking. If an organization wanted to, they want to exist, but they don't want to manage their banking, can they use the school activity funds, create an avenue for that to be a possible scenario? And then it's just setting clear expectations for, minutes and agendas, and making sure that these organizations that run under the auspice of Oxford Public School System, that they align with our values and make sure that they're following our policies when they work under our umbrella of the school system. So, Dr. Miller, Nicole, did I summarize that adequately? Is there, anyone want to add to that?
No,
But
I
that was
think,
the impetus for it.
I think that covers a lot. And really, from my reading of the bylaw, the biggest change is that we're asking that if you want to have a leadership role in a community organization, that you have a child in the school where you're looking to be involved in that organization. And that you would provide the superintendent's office with a copy of who the leaders are, so that we have transparency and we know who to get in contact with for communications. And that's not to say that other parents or community members can't still participate. It's just that they can't have a leadership role. That was the biggest change that I saw in this policy. Does anybody have any questions about anything?
I do. So under
ahead,
what,
Jen.
under what authority do we have to dictate what an organization that is a separate entity can do on their leadership board?
Can I weigh in on that? From
Go ahead.
my perspective is any organization that exists can exist, and they can set their own rules and expectations. But as a Board of Ed, as a whole, as our entity, we're responsible for setting policy, and we're responsible for protecting and controlling what happens within our school system and under our Oxford Public School District. So if an organization wants to do whatever they want to do outside of Oxford Public Schools, they can. But when they want to be on school grounds, when they want to interact with kids, when they want to be a part of the public school system as their group, working with the kids, working with the staff, the teachers, the administration, working on our facilities, they have to abide by our policies when they're in that environment. And so for us to set reasonable expectations for actions and guidelines and guardrails for organizations, I think it's our responsibility is to have a say and set reasonable expectations. I don't think it exceeds our responsibility. I think it's responsibility that falls directly on us.
Does anybody else have any other questions or concerns?
Yes, there was a forwarded email sent to you today, so I'm just curious as to, it was received by me today, forwarded to you. I don't know what you discussed in policy. I think that email brought some very serious concerns. So if we don't have whatever changes that I think you mentioned, Nicole, that you made in policy, how can we vote on a policy?
We don't have to tonight. It's just, this is what was put on the agenda, and as the policy chair, I'm bringing it forward to the whole board.
Oh yeah,
So
I'm
let-
just making,
yeah.
I want to be clear that
Yeah.
if we vote this policy through, we are voting as we saw it before your meeting.
Well, whatever the motion is, yes.
The policy committee discussed adding two sentences to the policy to address those concerns that were brought forward by that email earlier today. So that would be part of the policy revisions for this evening. Nicole, do you want to read what that sentence was?
So
Or do you want
Rob,
me-
I would have Shelley, are you talking about the sentence that was in the email that was passed around, or what Shelley
Yes.
was discussing earlier?
We
Oh,
don't have
okay.
the, yeah.
All right, so an email was sent forth with some,
So-
hold on, Shelley, please. There was an email that was sent forth to all of us regarding some concerns about the proposed language as it would pertain to outplaced students and also school administrators who don't have children in the school system. How would they be able to be a liaison or whatnot? And a proposed revision was that we add parents of students outplaced, but in the grade levels for the school covered are permitted to be in the organization's leadership. School administrators, teachers, and the Board of Ed liaison are also allowed to participate in the community organization leadership. My understanding is that language was run by the person who sent the email expressing the concerns, and that revision addressed the concern and they were comfortable with it.
so I just wanted to bring up, so in the policy, well, first of all, I don't have access to what's in board docs as far as, and I can't tell you why. I logged in on 3 different devices, but apparently, since you send the proposed policy to us, Nicole, it was revised, I discovered in policy committee meeting through no fault apparently of anybody's, but regardless, I don't have the latest and the greatest, but I did say in policy committee that I was concerned about the that outplaced language in order to fully protect the privacy of students who might be outplaced. Each school is a small community, et cetera. And I had proposed a different language, since every student who is outplaced under an IEP agreement or settlement agreement is a student who is fully enrolled in the Oxford Public Schools. I proposed different language, and I don't know if you want me to read it or if you just want to, talk further about my additional concern is that it seems there's a lot of controversy, and I had suggested at policy, again, I'm only one of 3 members, and the vote was not to follow through on this, but I thought if we tabled it, we could further consider all concerns about student privacy, about ability to have leadership fully to participate while still hearing and responding to and incorporating concerns regarding what leadership and members really are valid, for lack of a better word, members. And I just feel that we're not ready to forward this to a vote of the full board. But those really are my concerns. If you'd like to hear my proposed language changes, which for me are almost a moot point, because I feel that we should table this until it can be further fully vetted for all of those reasons, then I certainly defer to the.
I have another question. Has any of this been discussed with the administrators in the buildings, and what's their opinions?
I've been told yes, that it has been, but I don't have details regarding that.
And would you be surprised if you knew that one of the administrators is not in favor of this policy change? Were you aware of that in your policy discussions today?
No, that was not brought to my attention.
I wasn't aware.
Well, Mike and Rob, you had a meeting, so can you tell us how that meeting went?
I can say that at the meeting, the concepts of what was going into the policy was discussed with one administrator, but the policy had not been written at the time. But the concept of what was going into the policy was expressed clearly to the administrator that was in the meeting. It was supported.
Okay, but they didn't have the policy in front of them. So
The
that,
policy was written after that meeting. It
And
was
when were
run
the-
by,
When were the other administrators discussed with this? Rob, do you know? Can you give us those details? When the other administrators were made aware of this policy?
because
But
this
it's-
affects every school, right?
it's all organizations.
Okay.
But
so
they
that's-
all have rights in the all the buildings.
Mhm.
Sure, but typically policies are not given. I mean, Rob could of course speak for it, but typically policies, we don't look for popular voting by all the administrators before any policy is put forward. So I'm just saying for past practices, I don't remember the last time we went through roll call of what administrators approved, what policies we put forward.
You're making significant changes to organizations that are affecting their buildings. And for us to not at least inquire and have a dialogue with them about it doesn't feel right.
And I would agree, we're not asking for an administrator's vote, but just with, like any policy, just like the homework policy, it hadn't gone to the administration and the policy came and had all these parameters on homework and the administrators hadn't seen it but then they would be forced to enforce it when it might not be how they want to run, run that particular thing in their building. So again, Robert, were any other administrators spoken to about this?
Several administrators were included in the conversation. The policy is being brought forth by board members, not by me. The leadership of that school that's primarily affected by this was included in the conversation and agreed to all the parameters that were put into this policy. The policy was written from understanding based upon what those guidelines that were discussed at that meeting, and the administrator was on board at the time. And I even had a conversation this afternoon with that administrator and was waiting for tonight's meeting to take place and understood what was happening. It did not voice any concerns to me at the time. And that was 3 hours ago.
Joe?
Yeah, just reading the policy and going back on some of the history, I took this position knowing that it's going to take up time in my personal life to improve the district and contribute to my community. I don't think it's unreasonable to establish lanes for organizations that are in our district, since there really is no policies. I've wasted significant time dealing with some of these outside organizations, some clubs that were started illegally that cost the district money. I think at some point we need a starting point. I don't think it's unreasonable to start looking into this type of activity, being that, I don't want to get into the weeds of managing organizational money and getting into the weeds of controlling these organizations. I think they do have a vital role. It's just establishing what their role is going to be in our district. And I think that has to be established. I just don't, there has to be a starting point. I don't see how we don't have the policies that govern that already, but just my opinion.
Thank you. Anybody else? Input, questions, comments?
I just want to, one last thing, or Victor, you can go.
Go
Is
ahead,
there an
Vic.
example of this?
Is there a
that
what?
Is there some kind of an example of what we're looking at? You know, what group did what, or potentially what group could do something? I mean, I don't really understand, you know, is it somebody comes up and doesn't follow? I don't really understand what we're going here. I just, some kind of clear example of something that happened in the past would help put it in my brain.
For personally, for me, I don't think it's like roundabout discussions of stuff, like, you know, what establishes who owns property that's brought in on our facilities. You know, who has authority to give out usage to those facilities. Technically, I think it's up to the superintendent and the building administrator that it affects. And I know Parks and Rec becomes a part of that. You know, I went through the elementary school PTO, PTA, or whatever. I think they do a great job. But again, I just, again, my opinion, I just don't, there's very little policy written on any of this. I mean, what's to stop the Lions Club from becoming a part of our district and raising under our district's, you know, flag, I guess, if you want to say that. So.
Yeah, I read the policy and I thought the policy addressed issues that I hadn't heard before, which I thought was good. And then I read the letter that was sent, and it seemed like we somewhat addressed that. So I think we're on the right track. Maybe we're not 100% there, but it certainly sounds like something that needs to be in place to me. That's all I got to say.
One thing to add, I agree with you, Victor. And honestly, if we need to have another round for policy to evaluate it, I'm okay with that. I think some of the intention for moving quickly was to give organizations the time before the start of the school year, before it goes into effect. But if the board wants more time on that, I think the board should take the time. We want to get it right. We want to set guardrails. The only problem I see, the longer we wait, is it goes into effect closer to the start of school. So, you know, does that create an unfair burden on organizations to comply? That was the concern, or the reason, or the impetus to move forward at a faster pace, is to give organizations the opportunity to make adjustments to be in compliance. But if we want to take more time, I'm in agreement with that. I think there needs to be some form of guardrails, and I think it's in the district's best interest to be upfront with those guardrails, while working with the organizations that fall under the district.
I have one more thing. So I have one more thing, Steph.
Oh,
So
yes. Go ahead.
these two organizations, which, let's be clear, it's the Booster Club and it's PTO, both have their own set of bylaws. Their bylaws talk about time and positions, who can hold positions. And we're trying, by some of the wording in this policy that we're looking at, we're basically taking away their bylaw. Because we're saying, well, you can't do this if you don't have kids in that organization. If you're in that organization and your students are not in that school and they've graduated, or they're outside of the school district, you can't be part of a leadership team. But part of the problem is that some of those people, president, vice president, they have to be in position for a period of time. Treasurer, you don't want somebody walking in that has not been part of the organization. So by limiting that, you may have someone who's outside of your scope, but then you're not going to have someone who has experience doing the work of that committee, that board, that group. And I think that we're not looking, I know you guys want your guardrails, and that's up to you guys. But I also think that we are interfering with their bylaws. I believe that we need to really be careful and cautious about how we word it, what we're doing. If you want a group to be, more compliant to what your rules are, then have that discussion. But pulling a policy in July during the summer when people are around, this doesn't feel right. And you do have to be respectful of their own bylaws.
It's the counter, or Joe, you raised your hand first.
I don't think in this policy, it's unreasonable. You're saying leadership roles, they still could be a member of their organization, can they not?
Not with some of the bylaws, you have to be in a position that in the executive board for 6 months to a year.
So I understand what you're saying. And 30 years ago in my firehouse, we had what they call the black ball system to be voted in. We had to change our bylaws because that was technically illegal. So the state government, state law passed and said it has to be a majority paper ballot or handwritten ballot, and we no longer use the black ball system. So unfortunately, I agree in the sense that, yeah, they're going to have to change their bylaws. I mean, I'm not saying cut leaderships out. I don't think that would be right. But they can still participate in an advisory role as a member of that organization. They just can't be a leader of it, correct?
So you're okay with somebody walking into a PTO or a booster club meeting who has not been part of an organization to take over being their treasurer and not have any experience? I would be more worried about something like that than whether or not their kids have graduated or not.
Can I make a suggestion then that might address both issues by Deb and Joe? What if we put it out there that we're looking at making this change, but it's not going to be implemented immediately at the first of the school year? That we give them a 6 months heads up, a year heads up, whatever it needs, so that the community organizations that are impacted by this have a chance to revisit their bylaws, make changes to become in compliance. And it gives us a chance to slowly roll this out. So it's doesn't have that feeling, Deb, that we're trying to rush this through in the summer when people aren't paying attention, that it's completely transparent, that these are our concerns. This is our idea on how we're going to fix it. And we're going to give you time to get into compliance with what we're thinking so that we can continue to be partners for the best interest of the kids.
So
I
how
don't
would,
think the language is ready for even that kind of discussion, but
well, I
that's my
think, Shelley, if
opinion.
I hear what she's saying, I think you're saying that, that's kind of like running in the background, that the organizations would run as they have been, with the understanding that this is what people are looking for as far as, like you say, guardrails. And so you kind of work with them in order to put those guardrails in. Is that what you meant, Nicole?
Right. So maybe as of September 15th of this year, we're just asking that every organization who does business within our schools gives us a list of who the leadership is and starts providing us the minutes or the agendas from their meetings. That could be a first step. And then as we roll this out, maybe 6 months from now, we start to implement now we're only going to have leadership for people who have students in the school. They could still be advisory members, they could still participate, but they can't have that leadership role. So then it addresses Deb's issue of, do you really want to have a treasurer who's never balanced a checkbook before or seen how they do X, Y, and Z? They'll have a chance for that mentorship to get to them where they need. So it doesn't impact the organization or what they're trying to do, because what it comes down to, everybody who's doing this is doing it because they want to enrich the lives of the kids at the school. They're doing it for a good reason, and we don't want to squash that.
And I also think that a lot of the organizations have a hard time getting people to help.
Well, that was expressed in the email as well.
You know, when the first PTO meeting of the year was packed. By the last PTO meeting, I think there were 6 of us. So, you know, it's really hard to get people to stay involved in the process and to do all those things you want them to do for the kid.
So Nicole, how would you want to, does anybody else want to contribute anything? And then we'd have to put a motion on the table.
So hearing the concerns of the members, it sounds like we have the rough framework for what we're thinking. That this could be our first read. We can come back and we can make changes. And I think one of the biggest changes would be that we don't implement this as of September 15th, which I think is what we have in here. Maybe by September 15th, the organizations all provide us with who their leadership is, but we won't start with the immediate requirement that they have to have kids in the school for whatever group they're with. Depending on what the board thinks is an appropriate time to roll this out, we'll put that language in there. So we're building towards these guardrails. It's not happening immediately. So there's not this sense of urgency that we have to do this in July with special meetings over the summer.
Could I get a clearer sense then of what the language would look like? I mean, it sounds like, Nicole, if I understood you correctly, that the initial providing list of the leadership and did you say minutes? I'm not clear on the rest of it. Could you concretize that for us so that we know this is only what's going to be put forth as the policy at this stage, with the intent that other language and provisions would be added in a stepwise fashion, maybe with benchmarks as to when language would be added, something like that? I'm just trying to make it clear in my mind.
Shelley, do you have any of the language? It was attached with the agenda, but I understand that you were having technical problems. So have you not read this at all? Or I don't want to have to read the whole entire proposed thing, but I'm wondering, what do you have or what don't you have?
The rest of us haven't seen it either. So if there's a change, then maybe we could do the change that we've drafted, and that can be sent for information purposes.
The only change that we discussed.
I have
Go ahead, Shelley.
I have only what you, I'm sorry. I have only what you emailed to us. I don't have a more current version. So I apologize. I don't know if there were substantive changes, but I did recommend one change during the policy committee meeting. I don't know where that went. It sounds like Rob's proposed language is going to be adopted. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm concerned about at least protecting the privacy of special education students, by just tweaking what Rob said in the way that I brought forth that policy committee meeting, if anyone would like to hear it. Or are we just doing first and only those two provisos that you adopting only those two provisos that you earlier quantified, and then proceeding in a stepwise fashion from there? I'm just not clear on what we're exactly doing.
It's my opinion, and it's only one of 9, that we use the language that was disseminated to all of the board members. And with the proviso that we add the one sentence that I read that Rob drafted in response to the concern that was brought forth in the email that was shared with all of us. So it's the original language with the addition of parents of students outplaced, but in the grade levels for the schools covered are permitted to be in the organization's leadership. School administrators, teachers, and the Board of Ed liaison are allowed to participate in the community organization's leadership. Now, I understand, Shelley, that you have some concerns with that one sentence. I would say for the purposes of right now, that we just keep the language that Rob has introduced. And then we can come back in between the first and the second read, and we can add whatever changes you'd like to address at that time.
So just to be clear, Shelley, and I'm not sure if this is what you're asking, that we are not adopting the policy tonight. I mean, well, we have to have a vote, obviously, and see where that goes. We may not be adopting it tonight. It may go into a second read, which means it's going to be a work in progress. Is that correct?
That's my
Okay,
understanding.
okay. All right, thank you very much for that clarification.
No problem. So are there any other, did you have your hand up, Vinny, or no?
Oh, no, just itching.
Okay. Don't do that. So if we have a motion, Nicole, to that effect.
Sorry, it's chaos here right now. So I make a motion that we adopt motion that we adopt the first read of the policy that was disseminated to the board regarding community organizations with the one change of parents of students outplaced, but in the grade levels for the schools covered are permitted to be in the organization's leadership. School administrators, teachers, and the BOE liaison are allowed to participate in the community organization's leadership.
And
This is just down for a first read.
Second.
I'm confused. We don't adopt first reads. Are you saying that we move to this? I think the motion would be more that we move to a second read. We're not adopting this policy as a first read. We're just moving it to a second read. Is that right? Maybe I'm unclear.
I think that makes sense, Shelley. Yes. Typically, we don't have to vote on a first read, but in this instance, we did have the issue of the bylaw 9314. Were we deciding, did we want to do this on all one fell swoop, or did we want to do this incrementally? What I'm hearing from everybody is, or at least my interpretation is, that we'd feel better doing this incrementally. So this is the language we're working with for the first read that I just put into the record. And we'll be able to continue to work on this. Hopefully during our next meeting, it'll be a second read and it could be adopted at that time with everybody's input.
So again, in your motion, I don't know if you wrote it down, but it does not say adopting, right, Nicole?
It did. There's
Is
motion to adopt first read with one change.
Okay, so I think that's the language, because we're not adopting the policy. We're actually, we don't even, wouldn't it just be a recommendation to suspend policy 9311? And then that would be that vote, and that would be determine whether it's a first read or a second read.
Or you could suspend it. We never voted on the motion for bylaw 9314.
Right.
We
Right.
read it, but we never motioned to adopt it. So I don't know if we can make a motion to suspend it.
So wait one
No,
second.
that's
We-
not what
we
I
have
was saying, Mike. That's not what I was saying. I wasn't saying, I'm saying the motion would be whether or not to utilize bylaw 9314 to suspend policy 9311, which is to go right to, that means to bypass the second reading. If we vote in favor of that, then we would have another motion to adopt this policy. If we do not vote in favor of that, then the policy is a work in progress until second read.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second on the floor, so we have to either vote or withdraw it.
I'll withdraw it.
Vinny, you second withdrawal?
Did Vinny or Mike? I thought second.
I seconded, so I can
Oh.
second the withdrawal.
Okay, so like I said, if we, I think we should make a motion. And are we doing these policies separately?
Yes.
Okay, so I think the motion would be, to suspend policy 9311, and then it's either yay or nay. Does that make sense?
I don't know, where are you getting 9311? I don't know what that is.
I'm reading it from the agenda.
On the agenda.
It says recommended motion to suspend policy 9311, requiring 2 meetings for the approval of new policies or revisions.
It might just be a typo.
Oh, I don't know. That's what it's written. Robert, do you have any, is this correct?
9311 should be the policy requiring you to, the bylaw requiring you to have 2 reads before you adopt the policy. So you're using bylaw 9314 to bypass the policy requiring 2 reads for the policy.
Got it.
Okay, so that would be the motion.
All right, did you just make that motion, Stephanie, or no?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think I did, but let me do it.
What is
officially.
it?
And
Read it
Deb, it's in the agenda, so you don't have to write it on. Motion to utilize bylaw 9314 during the July 18th, 2023.
Oh, okay.
What?
I got it.
I'm still gonna say it though.
Yeah.
Special Board of Education meeting to suspend policy 9311, formulation, adoption, and amendment of policies requiring 2 meetings for the approval of new policies or revisions. And this applies to the community organizations policy. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So that's Vic as an
Aye.
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 Joe,
Aye. Where's
Why don't
this?
we-
Okay,
Why don't we use the reaction to do a thumbs up if we're voting for it?
yeah, Shelley, you understand that an aye means that we're only going with the first read.
oh, no, I'm sorry. It was breaking up a bit. I apologize. Stephanie, thank you for that correction to my understanding. No, I'm not going with the motion to just do a first read.
We revote, please.
What'd you say, Deb?
Can we do the vote so everybody knows what how we're actually voting?
Yeah. Why don't I just read, Zoom is hard, so I'll read your name and you tell me your vote, yay or nay. Deb,
No,
Vic,
Oh, God, no. I'm gonna go with Debbie, no. Yes.
Vinnie,
No.
Joe,
No,
Nicole,
No.
Stephanie. No, Shelley,
she said no already.
No.
okay, and Mike.
No.
Okay, motion does not pass, which means that the community organization policy is still a work in progress.
Okay.
Good.
So we will continue to work on that and hopefully get it back for a second read at our next scheduled meeting. All right, the next item on the agenda that we have is the school, use of school facilities. And the biggest change in that is we're taking a lot of the COVID language out of the policy because it doesn't apply anymore. We don't need it anymore. We're trying to simplify. We've discussed this during the policy committee meeting, and we're all in agreement that we wanted to put it forth for a first read tonight to answer any questions or concerns that you guys have. And hopefully get it approved for the next meeting.
So my only question would be, so that's the things that were redacted are the only changes in that? Maybe Joe knows that.
There were
Right.
a few, the COVID language was removed from the policy. We clarified the order of how facility use gets approved. There was a little bit vague language as far as the role the principal has, the superintendent. We cleaned that up. to make it straightforward. And then we added a fee structure for the use of for either single event or for a season for the use of the inside concession stand at the high school and the outside snack shack.
So what were the fundamental changes? Is there anything major?
Those were the changes. The prior policy did not have a fee structure for the use of the concession stand or the snack shacks. We added that in there for a single event and for a season based on the tier structure that's there. We also changed the language to make it clearer on the approval process for the use of the facilities, and we struck out all the language that was added for COVID. Because it wasn't necessary anymore.
So Nicole, if I heard you correctly, you're not proposing that this go through without a second read? Right?
I mean, it's up to the board on how they want to handle it. I don't see it as a major issue that's time sensitive. I don't think that there's been major changes that need to be implemented immediately. So I don't know why we would want to force this through without a second read, but again, I leave it up to everyone else for their input as well.
I didn't know if you guys discussed that at policy, that's all.
That specifically, no.
Okay.
When it came to timing, we really didn't want to be the ones to make that decision without talking to everybody else.
Okay. All right, so I guess we can make a motion and then if anybody has any further questions, or if anybody has questions right now on the facilities, use of school facilities policy.
Of course I do. Sorry, guys, but you have usage of the snack shack, and having been very involved with that in the past, that has been allowed to be used by the first selectman, by an organization who has equipment in there. So I think that by saying that we're now going to charge for that part of the building, I think you would have to have some kind of an arrangement to use the equipment, or figure out what you're going to do with the equipment if that's what you're going to do. You can't just all of a sudden decide that they don't get used, because that has been allowed to be operated by the first selectman. There was 2015, there was an email sent to the committee that was working on the process of that building. They built that. They put up that wall was put up by people from youth football, but those walls, those ceilings, those floor tiles, those countertops, refrigerators, all of that stuff does not belong to the district. So just want to bring that to your attention.
Can I follow up on that? Because I also have strong opinions on this topic. I believe the snack shack and all buildings are owned by the town, but we oversee them as a district. They are school buildings on school property that's also owned by the town. We're all public schools, so it's not privately owned anything. But I think the aspect of fairness is to allow other organizations access to some of these facilities. I don't think the first selectman, when writing that letter, which I have not read, I think Deb, you said that there was an email, but I don't think the intent was to deny anyone access to it for use. And I think having the opportunity, and I'm not saying that the equipment inside should become fair use by everyone, and I'm not saying that at all. But I think the space itself should be capable of being used by more than one organization. I believe it just named the organization by the Booster Club. I don't think they should be able to control who does and does not have access to the snack shack. I think that organizations that use the Wolverine Field should have the right to be able to rent that facility to use it, based on the fair use policy set in that policy. And Nicole, I agree with your statement of having it be a first read. I don't think the timing has to be to rush. But I think there is value in saying that just like the auditorium, we allow the rental of our spaces through organizations in the town and even organization outside the town. And I think in a public setting, we should have fair policy of what happens in the buildings that we are responsible for.
In the past, that building, the equipment and the usage was rented. There were people that did use it with permission. So I just want to make sure that that's clear too.
And so, I mean, again, this would be a first read, so everybody's comments here could be taken into consideration in revising or editing the policy. But my question is there, and I looked at it a couple of times and then I just looked at it again. I would suggest that there is something in it that's clear as to who is going to be managing this. Unless, I mean, maybe I'm just not aware because I'm not, I'm not involved in football anymore, but, or any other organization that would use the snack shack, but who would be responsible for scheduling who's using it, collecting any kind of fees? Is that, I guess I'm asking you, is that made clear in the policy and I just missed it? I guess I'm asking Joe as facilities.
I would say if you take a look at the very first page, community use of school facilities, if you go down to the third paragraph, it says the use of school buildings, grounds, equipment, and facilities will be authorized by the superintendent of schools or designee in conformity with regulation 3515. The superintendent or designee may modify the pricing at any time and may grant different terms if found warranted. So I think that addresses your concern right there, Stephanie.
Okay.
And there's an existing procedure that's in place. So we use a system called FMX, and an internal external organization requests access to use any of the school facilities, including the facility that we're in right now. The first approval goes to the building principal. They look at their calendar, make sure it's okay with what they're doing, doesn't interfere with any school events or school functions. And then it gets forwarded to the operations department for a chief operations officer to then approve it. The secretary gets involved, and if they fall under the fee structure, then they're billed through the finance department. So there's a whole structure in place already for all that.
Oh, that's what I was asking. Okay,
Yes.
so that's not, this policy is not changing that.
Not at all.
Thank you. Any further question or discussion?
Nope.
Okay.
So this is down for a first read. If anybody has any proposed language, please reach out to me sooner rather than later, because I want to be able to fully vet this and go through the proper channels so that when we come back the next time, that hopefully we could have a meaningful discussion about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole.
Mhm.
Thank you, everyone. So now we were at the update on end of year expenses and approval of final list of expenditures. I guess that's the Mike and Robert show.
Dr. Miller, I think you're on mute.
I was on mute. I'll turn over to Mike, who's the chair of the finance committee. I shared with the board in advance a memo that detailed the end of the year expenses and the options moving forward. And I'll let Mike kind of summarize where we are right now.
Okay. So has everyone had a chance to review the communication that was sent out, the surplus? Without beating this topic too heavily, we've had surplus from our budget that stemmed from several areas. One had to do with cost savings. That was the insurance that we were not able to factor in our budget because we weren't sure if we were going to make the changes with all the bargaining units. And we did not know at the time when we were doing the budget for this past fiscal year of what the true insurance number would be. That was a very large savings. We also, as teachers retire, as teachers move on to other districts, and we backfill, whether it's teachers or staff in general, the emphasis was put on looking for the most qualified, but the lower tiered levels to save money on staffing hires when appropriate. That was done, as well as having a mild winter. I know that we increased our budget items preparing for last year with the thought of high oil, high propane, high anything utility wise. I know that our approach to it was, double the number and then double it some more. We really increased our number for utilities to try to offset the unknown. We had utilities, we had things that were not all locked in place for the full year that we had to contend with. And then the last was an accounting issue with a general ledger line item that had a mistake. I don't know the explicit details of that, except that the dollar amount came to about $180,000 for that last surplus change. So to highlight that, it totaled, Dr. Miller, what's the exact number? Do you know what the number of the surplus is at this time?
It was just around $1 million altogether. That included our original snapshot of where we thought we would be.
Okay. These numbers, just to put in perspective, it's not baked into all of our budgets. The insurance savings is a one-time thing. Our new insurance costs going into next fiscal budget that technically we're in right now as of July 1st has the new insurance numbers. They're not anticipated to change. I believe we're locked in. Would you agree, Dr. Miller?
That is correct. We have a locked in rate for all of this upcoming school year. That's not going to change any.
Okay. So looking at, the board docs, we have some line items at the last, or I should say 2 board meetings ago. It was the first board meeting in June. We approved, Deb, do you remember the exact dollar amount we approved for security curriculum? And I think facilities as well. Do you remember what the number we approved, around 740?
745. 745.
745. So for this meeting, we have earmarked 745 that the board has approved. There is line items that are available for approval to spend down because we want to take the money and apply it to better the district, the students, whether it's security, curriculum, facilities, maintenance, whatever it takes to, better the school system. We want to make sure we do that with the funds that we have available. So at this time, has everyone seen the list? What's the exact dollar amount, just to reconfirm, Dr. Miller, that we have to apply? Is it 180,000?
At this point, we are looking to spend an additional $181,674, approximately based upon the end of the year bills coming in and some minor tweaks to some of the purchases that are in the dock to go. So it's give or take a little bit from there.
And at this time, there are 27 line items, one of which we don't know the cost. So I don't know how we can consider spending on it if we don't even know the cost. These line items are POs that exist in the system that can be, we can pull the trigger on because they are in the system and they have their purchase orders that are available to be, I forget what the exact term would be, but punched, pushed through, executed based on our recommendations of what's available.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that the encumbered money that is existing with the POs and or quotes that were presented in those line items be done at Dr. Miller's discretion and priority for the district.
Second.
And just to be clear, this is encumbered money. And just to be clear, this is money that we cannot roll over into next year, correct?
That is correct.
Could you repeat your motion one more time, please?
I'd like to make a motion that we spend the encumbered money from fiscal year 2022 and 2023 up to the discretion of Dr. Miller in the list of line items that is prioritized. Something along that lines.
And Mike, did you second it?
I seconded it.
So for discussion and clarification, Joe, you're talking about 1 through 18, because it was prioritized, and if we get to 19, we're in a negative. So you're saying that line items that were prioritized by Dr. Miller from 1 to 18 is what your motion is.
Yeah, I
referring-
mean, right. I mean, if there's already POs, obviously POs cut, it's encumbered money, which is an established yearly thing for municipalities. I mean, if we don't get this stuff this year, we're gonna have to, I mean, we're already in a back seat for next year, so let's get it. Either we don't get it this year, we're not gonna get it next year, so.
I understand. I just want to be clear on your
Yeah.
motion that you're talking about the list that he prioritized.
Yes, that's in the agenda, correct.
And if we go 1 through 18, if we go to 19, we go over. So anything that is below 18 will not be, we do not have the money for, because there's a
Well-
negative.
Yeah, right. What was 19? I'm looking at it now.
It was a
Wow.
baseball irrigation system. Can I, just because I didn't interpret Joe's rule to say 1 through 18, and
Yeah, I leave it up to the discretion of Dr. Miller to spend that.
That's what
because the
he did
concern
on
I
this
have
thing.
is, what if something zeroes out? What if, let's say, the PA system is back ordered, we can't get it for 4 years or something, and that frees up the money? I don't want to have to then come back to the board to move to line 19 or line 20 and so on to spend down. Or if something that is set at $10,000 costs 5,000 and we could buy the next line item. I don't want to pigeonhole Dr. Miller because I don't think we have the time to come back to another board meeting. I think by the end of July, no matter what, even with POs in the system, we either spend it or we lose it.
Yeah.
So I don't want to pigeonhole and say 1 through 18, but I would say that the order that Dr. Miller presented is fine with me. I couldn't pick one line item out of here that I thought deserved to be cut, to be honest. I just don't know day-to-day operations, what is the priority for the district in,
Mhm.
and I mean, to me, I trust the recommendation of Dr. Miller, but I want to make sure that we get it as close to zero as possible.
I mean,
And
there's
all
stuff
these seem to
probably that's
benefit
not-
the kids.
I mean, there's stuff that's probably not gonna get purchased, I mean, just like you said, supply issues, it seems to be a common narrative through any industry right now, so, it's, based on need, that's why I'd leave it up to him. I mean, we know what's in front of us, of what he's looking to purchase. I just assume leave it up to him though, what he feels is a priority.
All right, any further discussion?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Vic.
I have a problem with the surplus. In my life, in my business thing, a plus surplus was almost as bad as a negative. It's almost 3% that you miss your numbers by. I don't truly understand, all your reasoning for these surpluses. Some of these things that you mentioned certainly should have been noticed. And they didn't come up until after certain other events. So it almost seems opportunistic to me that this all occurred. $1 million overage after what we said and what we've done to people's lives of reducing this and laying off that and doing this is, to me, an embarrassment. And they can say carte blanche that they can give, jurisdiction over the balance of that money when I don't feel comfortable of why we have that money. Not every salary, every person we hired that I ever seen always came in about the same or more than what the other person, at least at every meeting, was the market demands we pay this much for that teacher, even though they're less experienced. Every superintendent, every staff person seems to come in for more. So I don't see the salary savings. The insurance things you knew about, the oil in fuel because of a mild winter, you knew about. So I'm not an accountant and I don't read every little line on there, but it just seems like there's holes in this as to why we have $1 million. And to give carte blanche the discretion of that surplus to somebody at this time, I'm a no for that.
Yeah.
Hope that makes sense.
to be clear, it's I don't want to use the word carte blanche. I think it's pretty narrowed down to the list that's presented in front of us. So we're just not buying just random things.
But I have a feeling the money was, let's say, for lack of a better term, ill-gotten, because we should have known it shouldn't be $1 million. It's 3%. I sat there at the different meetings saying that we needed an additional $1 million. And I put my name in my thing saying, these guys know what they're talking about. We have an outside agency, Millbrook or whatever it's called. And we're paying this guy and he didn't pick it up. There's something not right there. And
We've been projecting, sorry, I cut you off, sorry.
Excuse me, let me finish. I read the list. I want all those things for the field and all that kind of stuff. But I think we got to sit down and think of how to do it where there's got to be more control. I feel that we've been, the bucket of trust has been diminished as far as handling money.
I will say that we have been projecting since the fall when we switched to the healthcare carriers that there would be a budget savings. Our budget book that we developed in December and January, which we published, lists out where those savings were. So we've been publishing for 6 months now publicly that there was going to be a budget surplus as a result of the healthcare. We've also been sitting publicly as early as mid-fall at the Board of Ed Finance Committee and our finance reports, the savings in salary that we had. So this money has been publicly in our articulation for the last 6 to 8 months. Where it's coming from and why, and it's even printed in our budget book. If you take a look on our website and it's in our budget book, it's listed in there. The details are all as transparent as we can get. The budget savings were indeed from the health insurance and from the drawing that budget down from the health insurance this current school year or this past school year brought down our base so that when we went and we increased for this upcoming year that we're in right now, we lowered the entire base to begin with before we added on the increase to the new school year. So it helped both last school year and this upcoming year. That budget saving was post-budget development for this past school year because we didn't know we were switching carriers the time we brought our budget to the Board of Finance and to the Board of Education. We did that because the health insurance in the state went up so drastically post-budget approval this past school year. So all that was not in our control. And because the rates went up so high, we aggressively switched carriers. That aggressiveness to switch carriers gave us a huge budget surplus this year that exceeded over $500,000. That was not something that we had planned for. It's accounted for in this school year because we knew the savings that we were getting. But when the budget was approved in 2022, we had no way of knowing that we'd be renegotiating our carrier. And we knew as early as October, we've been sharing these figures.
Hang on, we always are renegotiating with the carrier. And it seems like every budget meeting, we're talking about renegotiating with the carrier. And we're always talking about cutting the bus expenses. We're always talking about fuel expenses and things that we've done to save. We talk about that all year long. We talk about savings with the teachers and the salaries and moving them more towards looking at the Rubik's Cube that they get paid by over to the left side, not having to drift down to the right-hand corner. We know all that. And on top of that, my apprehension is I think on top of it, you had a line item that you missed for $185,000 or something, an accountant journal entry that was wrong. Well, I'm not an accountant. I dealt a lot with accountants, and there's always a lot of words to a simple number. I'm just saying I don't feel comfortable with what happened. And $1 million plus to me is as bad as $1 million miss.
Thanks, Vic. Joe?
End of my story.
I just see that this is a culmination of years of efficiencies built into the point where we have been building controls in. And when I first got on this board, spending was out of control. So you're looking at something, and I understand, Vic, where budget is But what was the accounting error that it made up for the 187,000?
Yes. So every year, our finance company, Infinite Vision, they do about a half day, about a 5-hour session with the business manager, the payroll person, the accounts payable person. And basically, it's a new year rollover. They take the entire system. There's about 30 different steps in the process, or more. And it's very technical. They basically walk you through everything that you need to press in order to set up the new finance year for the new year. Part of that process is to roll forward the money from the previous school year to the new school year to pay the salaries during the summertime, because you're paying the 23 through 26 pays during the summer in July and August using the previous year's funds. The person that did that work from Infinite Vision did a wrong step in that process, and it over encumbered $187,000 that should not have been calculated into the salaries for this current school year. That was a step that was done incorrectly by that technician from Infinite Vision. It wasn't until we went to do the final payroll in June that it was identified as that error. And when we got on the phone with Infinite Vision, they were able to figure out that it was an error that their technician had done the previous year around this time. And that's what had caused it.
So are we going to fire that person? Or that accountant firm or whatever? I mean, if you shoot a rocket to the moon and you miss by, 400 yards, you still missed the moon. Here you put in the wrong algorithm, you put in the wrong number. I don't care that it's 30 steps. Accountants get paid to look at 30 steps. They charge you for 30 steps. They're supposed to be experts on 30 steps. So to miss $180,000, I don't care if it's 100 steps. There's something wrong there.
If you wanted me to do away with Infinite Vision, that means that we are spending $250,000 to $500,000 to purchase a new finance system and implement a new system. This is not just an accountant. This is the company that owns our finance system. That's the person that did this work. It's a major company. Yes, it was a problem that they caused, but removing them from our system would be a significant change to operations and require us to probably spend upwards of $250,000 to $1 million to purchase and implement a new finance system district-wide. That would be an implication.
You're throwing up a straw man. You said somebody missed that money. I'm just saying, and I don't want you to, where's the accountability? We have so little accountability in so many things that we do, from curriculum to staffing to block scheduling and all this other kind of stuff. So this $180,000 sticks in my craw with all the other things that I see accumulated from different things I'm involved in. So, it would have been nice if somebody said, we really corrected that, or we really did something. Or that the excuse that it was 30 steps and he missed it is just, to me, is covering it over. But anyway, enough has been said. I'm 1/9, so let's get to the other 8.
I have something to say.
Go ahead,
So
Deb.
we as a finance subcommittee did not get numbers for health insurance. We were not given any idea of how much we were saving. And I know that we've asked and we've been told we're in good shape. Don't worry about, we're in good shape. We're going to have a surplus, couple $100,000. Never in my wildest dreams, and sitting here talking about this, all of our finance meetings would it have been close to $1 million. So I feel personally that I am not the person to be on the finance subcommittee. So someone can take my place. I am resigning from the committee. You figure out who else can do it, because I feel like this was wrong and I don't want to be part of it.
All right, I understand, Deb. I don't blame you.
Can I ask one other thing? If we don't do anything with this money, what happens to it?
We
It
all
goes
know.
back to the town.
All of it.
Yes.
No, you don't have to, you can send a portion back. You can send $5 back. It's not all or nothing. And the other point, to Vic's point as well, is that, kind of few that it was, a monumental error. in supposedly our favor because all 9 of us are personally responsible for the finances. So if this went, if this went the other way, $190,000 in the other direction, then, and there are districts that have had that happen. And I don't know I don't know if you go to the town and you mea culpa and you get more money. I don't know, but all I do know is that the 9 of us are personally responsible for this budget.
And that's why we play very conservative with the finances. We try not to overspend early in the year. We end up with some stuff at the end of the year because
The
Right.
thing is, Robert, because I'm not an accountant either, so I also agree that I feel like I shouldn't be on finance, but I'm going off the whole board soon enough. But if you look in May, there was a $1.7 million overage of certified salaries. So you had to know who your salaries were in May, and to have $1.7 million over. And it was over in April and it was over in March. So your salaries are something that are, you have a really good handle on. It's not an oil price. It's not a weather thing. So I think that it was there all along, and maybe it was expected that we would pick it up, but we went along with when we were told we're in good shape and it'll be a couple $100,000. So that's what happened. So with that, and Joe, we have a motion on the table to, allow the superintendent, and I guess it's to spend down at his discretion. So, I mean, I guess that's the motion and that's the second on the table. So that's what we have. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nicole, wait, hold on. I gotta find my list here.
I think Shelley needs to be made co-host so she can unmute
I'm gonna
Okay,
do that right now.
and vote.
Nicole, Shelley. Oh, no, I don't know what Shelley is. Mike is a yes. Nicole's a yes. Joe's a yes.
Yes, I'm
Um,
unmuted now, so yes.
Shelley's a yes. Vic,
Can I pass?
You
No,
can abstain.
well, I'll go. I mean, well, you can't really abstain unless you have, just because you don't
Here's my
want to vote.
problem. I
But-
don't want to I don't want to give the money back to the town. And I want the things fixed that we can fix. Okay, I made my statement. I think everybody knows where I think the blame or the lack of control was over it. The money is there. The projects are there. So let's spend the money. But I'm on record that I'm very, very unhappy with me putting my name out in front of sitting at those board meetings and finance meetings, saying that these guys know what they're doing. We need that extra $1 million. And talking about that, I was PO'd that it was cut, and that I sat there and we eliminated different positions and stuff. I feel very guilty about doing that to the students and to those individuals by accounting errors. But I don't want to take and punish the teams in the fields and stuff like that. So I will begrudgingly vote yes,
Okay,
because I want the money spent.
gotcha. Vinny? Yes. Deb?
No,
And I am a no, so, but motion carries. Okay. Next, update on the expenses, and so our next is going into executive session. Are you still there, Deb? Because you're,
yeah, I'm here. My camera just keeps going in and
so do you have a motion? to go into
Yep,
executive
motion to enter into executive session to discuss a personnel matter and invite in Superintendent Miller.
Second.
Okay.
Second by Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah.
Abstain? Okay, we're in executive session at 7:56.
Okay,
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna move the people in the waiting room that are here into the waiting room and turn the live feed off.